Communication is really about two things, right? A really good communicator, because I do a lot of public speaking. I've been a professionally paid public speaker for about 12 years. And, one of the things that people try to do in communication, you'll find it quite a lot with poor communicators, is they try to make a simple thing sound really complicated to make themselves sound clever. And I'm sure you've come across that. You employ people and they try to make the simplest thing sound very complicated to make them sound like they're worth their money, essentially, right? And the truth of the matter about a good communicator is a good communicator takes a very complicated thing and makes it very simple.
But do you think that's also a skill in itself, in the fact that you maybe look at things in a different way? So, for instance, my boys are sort of a bit dyslexic. And one of my boys, he just looks at everything totally differently from me. Like I'll sort of mention, we're attempting to do this. And he'll literally just go, well, why don't you do it like, typical kind of 17-year-old boy, well, why don't you do it like this? And I'm a bit like, oh, because it just would never come into my mind to even think in that way. But how very clever, absolutely. So it's kind of more than just the way of communicating, isn't it? It's potentially the way you break it down in your head, and then you're able to share that, so to speak. So again, there's a chap who I work with who's an engineer, and he basically takes the complex and makes it simple, but he does it more like writing it down, and you kind of put it onto a piece of paper, and suddenly what was really complex in your head is suddenly really simple on a piece of paper. So it's more than just explaining it, isn't it? It's actually understanding and then being able to verbalize it.
It's really about speaking the other person's language, right? One of the ways to communicate, we'll touch on kind of building rapport in a moment or two, but one of the ways to communicate with another person, if you want to really build rapport with another person, is you speak in their language. So, for example, one of the guys that I'm working with as a business consultant is a GP. So what I do with that person is I speak in language that he would understand, and I do analogies related to medicine. And that makes it very simple for him to understand. Another chap that I'm working with is, he spends a lot of time in the gym, and he spends a lot of time and he spent his whole life playing football and doing sport and doing martial arts. So for him, I will speak in terms of sporting analogies. And what you must remember is that language is very, very interesting. I remember working with an NLP coach and helping him with one of his courses. And I brought something new to him that he'd never used before, which I learned from one of the co-creators of NLP, because I was lucky to be trained by one of the co-creators of NLP, one of the two people who actually invented it. And I was taught that what you do is, if you put 6 people in a room and you take a word like love or heat or danger, and you ask 6 people to write down what that means to them, it's very unlikely you will get the same answer twice. So every word that we use, me and you, we think we mean the same thing, but we don't. So really, to be a good communicator is not about speaking at people. It's about listening to people. So the skill of a great communicator is not how well you can speak. It's really how well you can listen. So I will pick up on the nuances of your language and say, right, okay, when, Emma uses the word, I love this. This has this connotation to Emma, but it has an entirely different connotation to me.
Yeah, really. It's so interesting. And I think this whole communication thing, I remember when I very first started in the corporate world, and I arrived at L'Oreal, and I was all very excited, and then, we started emailing. Obviously, it's a bit of a while ago now. It's kind of, but I remember getting into trouble over an email that I sent, because I just slammed out an email. I didn't reread it. And what had come out of my head to me seemed great. And I'm a very polite person. I kind of, I take a bit of pride in, being kind and all of that. Anyway, it was read in a way that it felt almost aggressive, the email, because obviously I'd just banged it out. And that was it was a frightening learning for me, but it was a great learning for me to understand that people read things totally differently, haven't we? We've all sent a text message. We've all said things to other people, and they can be read differently. And I learned a new thing recently as well about mirroring. So, you know, you and I could mirror you've got your hand on your chin. I could mirror that. But even in the written word, so in WhatsApp messages, so obviously we communicate a lot via WhatsApp, and I was in a sales scenario, and they were mirroring. So if somebody did one or two word answers, then you mirror that 1 or 2 word answer. And if it's, you know, if they write war and peace, then you write a bit more war and peace. And, you know, it's just so many, as you say, nuances like that I hadn't even thought of. So yeah, I think it's, you know, really tremendous to have these kind of things. And would you start, you know, to somebody who's say really early on in this, would you say kind of choose something and just work on that until that is part of your kind of core? Or would you advise to, you know, to go and do LLP, or what would you advise for people to start going? I know that's a bit of an end of the session question, but it's an interesting one.
Well, I think, you know, if you think property is a big subject, then look at communication and you'll see what a really big subject is. Now, for somebody, nobody is a starting communicator. You know, nobody's coming into this industry and they've never communicated before, right? But have they communicated well, and have they communicated in a relevant way to what they're doing now? So one of the things that quite often happens in communication that breaks down communication is, and you just said it, I'm a very polite person, right? So in a negotiation, for example, you get 2 people being very polite to each other and saying nothing.
Yeah, I love that.
And they both come away and go,
dancing around each other.
I've no idea where that other person is. I've no idea what they want from this, right? And then you come away and you say, well, I've no idea what they want either, but they were a lovely person, right? Now, I'm not often described them as a lovely person, right?
I think you're lovely, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Right? The fiber's in the post,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
But actually, in something like a negotiation, yes, you've got to build rapport, but you've also got to be fairly direct. You know, this is what I need from you, and what do you need from me, right? And it's interesting, you know, people go and see houses, for example. Let's take a real scenario, right? And let's imagine that there's a house on the market, right? And let's imagine that you're coming to see that house, right? And a bit of role play. We'll do a bit of role play. How about that?
Perfect.
Right. Okay. So I'm selling a house, and you want to buy this house for whatever reason, right? So let's go through a kind of a role play of how you might go about that. So I'm opening the door, you've booked a viewing with the agent, the vendor showing you around, and let's do a kind of 5-minute role play on that. So, hi, are you Emma?
Yes, hi, is it Paul?
I'm Paul, yes.
Oh, fantastic to meet you. Shake hands. Oh, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for meeting me here today. I really appreciate your time.
No problem at all. I've got a few viewings this afternoon, so I'm staying in for them.
Fantastic. And so what, how long have you had the property?
First mistake.
Should I have talked about your clean shaven skin or your corduroy trousers?
You made the first mistake. I would say that 80% of the audience who are listening to this now, who listen back to it, will make. You talked about the property.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
What's people's favourite subject, Emma?
Themselves, Paul.
Indeed, Emma. Right. So let's imagine that we've walked into somebody's house and we've did the hellos, right? And we've walked in and we look around and we see that they have pictures of their children, or they have pictures of animals, right? One of the first things I would say was, so let's say it was animals, for example, and it was horses in your case. And there was pictures of horses and kind of horse memorabilia all about the house, right? I would say, so do you like horses then, Emma?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we've got probably too many.
How many horses do you have at the moment?
We currently have 3.
It's a lot of horses. I had a friend once who said he had children and horses are more expensive than children.
And that's interesting. Sean has just put in a comment with this, and it's something that I would agree with. He said, great conversation. My communication is poor. Should have worked on it years ago. Words evoke images. We all call upon different images. And I struggle with small talk, which is an interesting one, which is what we're doing here.
So that's what we're doing, right? So do you ride? Is it your children that ride? Who does the majority of the riding?
Yes, I have been riding a little bit more recently because one of my sons is away at sixth form college. But yes, inherently, I have them for my kids. I grew up with horses, and it was such an incredible opportunity that I want my kids to have that too.
Did you have a horse when you were very young?
Oh, yes. I pretty much can't really remember life. Well, there was never life without horses. In our family, that's all we talk about. Even now, when my parents haven't obviously got horses anymore, when we come around the dining room table, generally it will be about horses. So, yeah.
And did you have a favourite horse?
Oh, I mean, I have some that I look back fondly with, certainly my early ones, but I do have one that I was, very successful on. So I suppose, yeah, that would be the one that I remember mostly. I achieved some very great things with him, really.
So you did competition riding then?
Yes.
What was your best competition?
So I represented the Southeast. I got the best dressage. Yeah, I suppose doing Windsor horse trials. Varying things. I suppose, Pony Club Championships. That's like a really big thing when you're a kid. So it was good. It was and in fact, after that, it was a choice for me whether to go professional or not, and I chose not to.
I see when you talked about the kind of the pony trials there, that was a kind of your face lit up. So I take it you remember that kind of both for yourself and your children with like really good memories.
Yeah, absolutely. And these events, they're so big, like with the kids now, like we go away for weekends away, and it just makes such incredible memories. And you can't buy those, can you? So that's to me just amazing. My 17, I mean, one of mine rode until he was 16, my other son's 17, and to have twin boys to ride for that long is quite amazing. So it's also hard work, but good fun.
Yeah, and not as there are boys that kind of that ride, but not as many as there are girls. So kind of like keeping boys interested must be tougher than keeping girls interested, I think, because it's seen as a more female sport. But lots of guys kind of do ride and ride really well. So you must be proud of the boys then. Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot more males at the top level, but at the grassroots level, it's majority ladies.
Yeah. So we did just over 5 minutes there, right? Yeah. Did any of that feel uncomfortable at all?
No, it was good. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because, you're right, Sean, Paul has made me feel good and relaxed, but I'm a very practical person. And in fact, I was talking to a potential investor the other day, and I literally had to stop myself doing what I did with you earlier and jumping straight in and go and have the small chat. And I have to be really careful not to make it just part of the routine. Like you say, you've got to listen, you've got to be genuinely interested. And I am, but, quite often it's it's more of a practical thing. I can see my business partner in the chat. We'll often sit down and we'll have been chatting business, and then it's you feel like you should ask about their family. I mean, and we do genuinely care, but we just tend to just jump straight into it. But it is also really important to have that background as well.